Look, the descent into human hell on earth and a diplomatic nightmare is happening faster than we might have imagined in the Middle East. A massive explosion at a Gaza hospital has reportedly killed hundreds of people and injured hundreds more. Hamas and other Palestinian organisations immediately blamed Israel, and politicians and activists around the world were only too happy to jump to that conclusion. Israel denies this and has cited broadcast footage of a rocket aimed at Israel that malfunctions, misfires and explodes over Gaza before the hospital explosion just below. Israel also says that radar scans, its own data and recordings of terrorist communications asking, "Was that us?" prove that it was an Islamic Jihad rocket, a horrific own goal rather than Israeli targeting. Israel also has shown images to demonstrate the blast did not destroy the hospital but hit its car park, and it says Hamas and others have drastically exaggerated the numbers of casualties. Regardless of the truth, which could be debated for days, of course, this bloodshed derailed President Joe Biden's Middle East mission before he landed. He's in Israel now, as you've seen, but his planned next move, a summit in Jordan with Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, along with the King of Jordan and the Egyptian president, well, that's been cancelled now by these leaders, people crucial in any Palestinian guarantees or settlements. The trouble is, of course, this warfare has been triggered not by the Palestinian people or the Palestinian Liberation Army. It was triggered by a Hamas terrorist atrocity. With all this unfurling, it's crucial that politicians stick to the facts rather than pursue their ideological goals and exercise their ideological prejudices. But the Greens in Australia have escalated their criticism of Israel and called for our government to withdraw its support for Israel's ground incursion in Gaza aimed at rooting out Hamas. The Greens claim some sort of moral equivalence argument. Here's their leader on the initial unprovoked attack by Hamas that has killed at least 1,400 people.
The Greens have condemned the attacks of Hamas. They amount to war crimes, and taking of hostages is a war crime, and we've condemned them in the strongest possible terms.
No, you haven't. What weasel words. This was not a war crime. There was no war. This was an obscenity committed by the Hamas Islamist extremist terrorists. They want Israel eradicated and Jewish people annihilated, and any other non-believers too, by the way. This attempt to somehow assign Hamas the status of soldiers who have broken the rules of war is itself just so broken and wrong. It misunderstands or it misrepresents the horrible, almost inconceivable nature and scale of their terror attacks. Of course Israel has to root out Hamas, who happen to run Gaza and only Gaza. Otherwise Israel would be giving up on its hostages, allowing the savages to get away with this atrocity, and it would be sitting back and waiting for the next act of butchery, deliberately targeting its most vulnerable citizens. Yet in Australia, the Greens go on like this.
We are seeing the Israeli military engage in a campaign of indiscriminate bombing of civilians.
The truth is this: Palestinians have been under brutal Israeli oppression for 75 years.
We need an immediate ceasefire of all parties. The invasion needs to stop. The international community needs to join the push to stop the invasion.
This is vile and delusional stuff. Unless you're driven by a hatred of Israel, which often goes hand in hand with a hatred of the US, well, you couldn't have anything but sympathy and outrage for what Israel has suffered yet again and support the aim of eradicating Hamas. It's a horrific and deadly task that could lead to heavy sacrifices of life and limb by the Israel Defence Force, which clearly and openly is creating every opportunity for civilians in Gaza to exit the danger zone. Hamas wants civilian casualties. Hamas wants world outrage against Israel. Hamas is a death cult like Islamic State, like Al-Qaeda, like Jamaat Islamiyah. Hamas doesn't want to resolve the Palestinian question. provide the two-state solution that most of the world and most Palestinians would welcome, Hamas wants hatred and bloodshed to fester in order to keep alive and inflame its fanatical mission. People like the Greens just become useful idiots for this extremist endeavour.